and their first glimpse of a human warship. First encounter. Commander Zethkar adjusted his sensory apparatus as the Valerian exploration vessel Silent Wind drifted through the outer reaches of the Sol system. The insectoid officer had served the Galactic Federation for over 30 cycles, mapping unknown sectors and cataloging primitive species. This assignment seemed routine. Investigate reports of a developing civilization that had recently achieved faster-than-light communication. The bridge hummed with quiet efficiency. Navigation Officer Listha, her serpentine form coiled around her station, monitored the passive sensors while communications specialist Morden's crystalline structure pulsed with soft blue light as he decoded various electromagnetic signals emanating from the third planet. "Commander," Morden's voice resonated through harmonic frequencies. "The signals are fascinating. This species has developed remarkably sophisticated entertainment broadcasts and data networks. Their mathematical principles are quite advanced for their technological level." Zethkar's mandibles clicked in acknowledgement. "Any signs of spacefaring capability beyond their immediate planetary vicinity?" "Minimal, sir. Some primitive satellites and what appears to be a small orbital station. Nothing that would suggest they pose any threat to galactic stability." The Galactic Federation had protocols for such encounters. Species were typically observed for several cycles before first contact was initiated. The humans, as they called themselves, would likely be invited to join the Federation as a junior member species once they demonstrated sufficient technological and social development. Science Officer Talvera, a graceful humanoid with translucent skin, looked up from her analysis station. "Commander, their cultural broadcasts are remarkable. They seem to have an unusual fascination with conflict scenarios and what they term warfare. Most curious for a species that hasn't encountered external threats." "Elaborate," Zethkar commanded, his interest piqued. "Their entertainment media contains countless scenarios involving space battles, alien invasions, and military conflicts on a scale we rarely see even among established galactic powers. They seem to spend considerable mental energy imagining combat situations that, given their technological limitations, should be purely theoretical." Lysitha's scales shifted to a concerned pattern. "Perhaps it's a reflection of their internal conflicts? Many pre-contact species struggle with planetary unity." Before anyone could respond, the ship's proximity sensors began chiming. Talvera's hands flew across her console, her expression shifting from curiosity to alarm. "Commander, we have a problem. Something just entered the system's edge. Mass signature is substantial." "Define substantial," Zethkar ordered, moving to the central command platform. "Approximately 1,500 meters in length. The energy output is unlike anything in our databases. It's not using any propulsion system we recognize, yet it's moving at significant sublight velocity." The main viewer activated, showing a distant speck against the star field. As the ship's sensors focused and enhanced the image, the bridge fell silent. The vessel that appeared on screen defied immediate classification. Its hull was angular and aggressive, painted in matte colors that seemed designed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Multiple weapon ports were clearly visible along its length, and strange protrusions suggested technologies unknown to Federation science. "By the ancestors," Lysitha whispered, her voice barely audible. "What manner of ship is that?" Morden's crystalline form had shifted to a deep red, indicating extreme stress. "Commander, I'm detecting massive energy signatures. Whatever powers that vessel is generating more raw energy than our entire fleet back at the home system." Zethkar felt his exoskeleton tighten involuntarily. In 30 cycles of exploration, he had never encountered anything like this. Federation vessels were designed for efficiency and peaceful exploration. Even their military ships prioritized shields and defensive capabilities over offensive weapons. This human vessel looked like it had been designed by someone whose only consideration was how much destruction it could unleash. "Are they targeting us?" he asked, surprised at how steady his voice remained. "Negative, sir. They don't appear to have detected us yet. Our stealth systems are holding." The human warship continued its approach toward the inner system, and as it drew closer, more details became visible. Gun turrets that could obliterate asteroids, missile pods containing enough ordnance to level continents, hull plating that looked like it could withstand direct hits from weapons the Federation considered theoretical. "Talavera, analysis. What are we looking at?" The science officer's hands trembled as she worked. "Commander, this vessel represents a completely different approach to space engineering than anything we've encountered. Where Federation ships prioritize efficiency and multi-purpose functionality, this appears designed for one purpose only: combat." "But that's impossible," Lysitha protested. "They're a pre-contact species. They shouldn't have the technology to build something like this, let alone the need for such a vessel." "Perhaps," Talavera said quietly, "we've misunderstood what kind of species we're dealing with." Morden's voice carried new overtones of fear. "Commander, I'm picking up communications from the human vessel. They're using military-grade encryption, but I'm detecting fragments. They're referring to something called patrol protocols and threat assessment procedures." The implications hit Zethkar like a physical blow. "They built this as a routine patrol vessel?" "It appears so, sir. And Commander, there are energy signatures suggesting this isn't the only one." On the screen, the massive human warship continued its inexorable approach. Every line of its design spoke of a species that had turned warfare into an art form, that had taken the concept of military engineering and pushed it far beyond what the Federation had ever imagined necessary. Zethkar's training told him to maintain observation protocols, to gather intelligence and report back to Federation command. But every instinct he possessed was screaming at him to retreat, to get as far away from this system as possible before that terrifying vessel noticed their presence. "Maintain stealth," he ordered finally. "Continue monitoring, but prepare for immediate departure if they show any sign of detecting us." As his crew worked with nervous efficiency, Zethkar couldn't shake the growing realization that the Federation's first contact protocols might be completely inadequate for dealing with whatever these humans had become. The gentle, peaceful approach that had worked with hundreds of species might not be sufficient for a civilization that built ships like the one now dominating their view screen. The human warship passed their position, its wake distorting space itself with residual energy from drives that shouldn't exist. In its passage, it left the crew of the Silent Wind with a new and terrifying understanding. They had found a species that had made war into science, and that science had produced something the galaxy had never seen. Something that made every Federation vessel look like a child's toy by comparison. Their first glimpse of a human warship, the fleet. 3 days after the first terrifying encounter, Commander Zethkar had barely slept. The Silent Wind maintained its position at the edge of the Sol system, hidden behind the gravitational shadow of a gas giant while his crew continued their observations. What they had discovered in those 3 days had fundamentally changed their understanding of everything they thought they knew about warfare, technology, and the very nature of civilization itself. Science Officer Talavera worked tirelessly at her station, her translucent skin now bearing stress marks that hadn't been there before the mission began. She looked up as Zethkar approached, her expression grave. "Commander, the analysis of the human vessel's capabilities is disturbing. The energy readings we detected weren't from their engines alone. That ship carries enough firepower to sterilize an entire planet." "Surely that's an exaggeration," Zethkar replied, though his mandibles betrayed his uncertainty. "I've run the calculations 12 times. Conservative estimates suggest their main weapons could crack continental plates. And Commander, She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. That was just one ship. Navigation Officer Lysithaw suddenly straightened at her station, her serpentine form going rigid with alarm. Commander, multiple contacts emerging from the inner system. Energy signatures match the first vessel. The main viewer activated, and Zethkar felt his exoskeleton lock in place involuntarily. Emerging from behind the human homeworld came not one ship, but an entire fleet. Dozens of vessels, each as massive and intimidating as the first, moved in perfect formation through space. "By all the gods of the void," communications specialist Mordun whispered, his crystalline structure flickering between deep red and pure white. "It's a battle fleet." The human vessels moved with a precision that spoke of extensive training and coordination. Their formation was unlike anything in Federation tactical databases, optimized not for exploration or peaceful contact, but for overwhelming dominance in combat situations. Talavera's voice shook as she provided analysis. 47 vessels, Commander. Each one approximately the same size as the first, but I'm detecting variations in design. Some appear optimized for long-range engagement, others for close combat. There are support vessels, logistics ships, and... oh no. "What is it?" Zethkar demanded. "Commander, 3 of those vessels are larger than the others. Much larger. The energy signatures suggest they're not just warships, they're mobile battle stations. Each one could serve as a command center for conquering an entire solar system." On the screen, the fleet continued its approach. The smallest vessels were still larger than Federation dreadnoughts, and the largest dwarfed anything the galaxy had ever seen. Their hulls bore no decorative elements, no artistic flourishes common to Federation ships. Every surface served a purpose: weapon mounting, sensor arrays, or armor plating thick enough to withstand weapons that could level cities. "Are they conducting military exercises?" Lysithaw asked hopefully. Mordun's readings suggested otherwise. "Negative. Communications traffic indicates this is a routine patrol deployment. Commander, they're referring to this as a peacekeeping mission." The implications were staggering. What the Federation would consider an invasion fleet, these humans treated as routine peacekeeping. Zethkar found himself reconsidering everything the Federation thought it knew about military doctrine. "Talvera, what's your assessment of human tactical thinking based on their fleet composition?" The science officer studied her readings with obvious reluctance. "Commander, their tactical doctrine appears to be based on the principle of overwhelming force. Where Federation strategy emphasizes maneuver, negotiation, and minimal necessary force, the humans seem to believe in bringing such massive firepower to any situation that resistance becomes impossible. But surely they must have conflicts with other species to justify such military development," Zethkar reasoned. "That's what makes this so disturbing, sir. Based on our observations, they've developed this entire military-industrial complex while fighting only amongst themselves. They built interstellar weapons of mass destruction to resolve planetary conflicts." One of the larger human vessels broke formation, moving toward the outer system where the silent wind remained hidden. Zethkar's crew tensed as the massive ship approached their position, its sensor arrays sweeping the area with increasing intensity. "Are we detected?" Zethkar asked. "Unknown, sir. Their scanning technology is unlike anything we've encountered. It's not just looking for ships. It's mapping gravitational anomalies, electromagnetic disturbances, and what appears to be quantum fluctuations." The human ship passed within 50,000 kilometers of their position. At that distance, its true scale became apparent. The vessel was not just large, it was a mobile fortress, armed with weapons that could crack moons and protected by armor plating that could deflect asteroids. Through their passive sensors, they detected thousands of human crew members working with mechanical precision aboard the ship. But what truly disturbed Zethkar was the casualness of it all. These humans weren't preparing for war. This was their normal state of readiness. "Commander," Talvera said quietly, "I've been analyzing their cultural broadcasts further. Their entertainment media consistently portrays scenarios where peaceful species are conquered or destroyed by more aggressive ones. They seem to have concluded that the universe is fundamentally hostile and that survival requires overwhelming military superiority." "But the galaxy isn't like that," Lysitha protested. "The Federation has maintained peace for thousands of cycles through diplomacy and cooperation." "Try explaining that to a species that has never encountered peaceful aliens," Zethkar replied grimly. "They've had to imagine what space warfare would look like, and their imagination has produced this." Another communication burst from the human fleet caught Mordun's attention. "Commander, they're discussing patrol routes that extend to multiple star systems. This isn't just a local defense force. They're planning to project power across interstellar distances." The strategic implications were terrifying. The Federation had always operated under the assumption that newly contacted species would be decades behind galactic standards in military technology. The humans had somehow leapfrogged centuries of normal development and created a war machine that could threaten established galactic powers. "What happens when they encounter other species?" Lysitha asked quietly. "Based on their tactical doctrine," Talvera responded, "they'll assume hostile intent and respond with overwhelming force. Species that might have been peaceful allies will be treated as potential threats to be neutralized." Zethkar watched the human fleet continue its maneuvers, each movement precise and purposeful. These weren't explorers or peaceful traders seeking contact with the galaxy. These were warriors who had spent generations preparing for conflicts that hadn't yet materialized, and their preparations had made them into something unprecedented in galactic history. "Sir," Mordun announced suddenly, "I'm detecting new signals. More ships are launching from the human homeworld." On the viewer, additional vessels emerged from Earth orbit. Not warships this time, but what appeared to be support craft, mobile shipyards, and logistics vessels. The humans weren't just deploying a fleet, they were establishing the infrastructure to maintain military operations indefinitely across multiple star systems. "They're not just ready for war," Zethkar realized with growing horror. "They're ready to conquer the galaxy." The human fleet completed its formation and began moving toward the outer system, heading in a direction that would take them toward Federation space. 47 vessels carrying enough firepower to devastate civilizations, crewed by a species that had never learned that the galaxy could be anything other than hostile. Zethkar knew that everything was about to change. The peaceful expansion of the Federation, the careful diplomatic protocols, the assumption that superior technology would always prevail over aggression, all of it was about to be tested by a species that had made warfare into an art form while the galaxy slept peacefully. Their first glimpse of a human warship. The Revelation Commander Zethkar had made his decision. After 5 days of observation, watching the human fleet conduct exercises that demonstrated capabilities beyond anything in Federation databases, he knew that merely reporting back would not be sufficient. The galaxy needed to understand what was coming, and more importantly, they needed to understand it before the humans discovered they were not alone. "Talvera, prepare a comprehensive tactical analysis. Include every detail of their capabilities, fleet composition, and strategic doctrine. The Federation Council will need complete information to make proper decisions." The science officer nodded grimly. "Commander, I should note that my analysis suggests these humans have capabilities that exceed our own in several critical areas. Their weapons technology, power generation, and tactical coordination are all substantially advanced beyond Federation standards." "How is that possible?" Lysitha asked. "They're a pre-contact species. They should be centuries behind us technologically." "That's the disturbing part," Talvera replied. They didn't follow the normal technological development path. While most species develop space travel, then peaceful exploration, then gradual military advancement, the humans appear to have developed military technology first and adapted it for space travel. Their entire technological base is built around conflict resolution through superior force. Navigation Officer Lysitha's scales shifted to patterns Zethkar had never seen before, fear mixed with something approaching admiration. Commander, if they built all of this just from fighting among themselves, what will they become when they encounter external threats? Before anyone could answer, Communications Specialist Morden's crystalline form suddenly blazed with urgent light. Commander, priority transmission incoming. It's directed at us specifically. That's impossible, Zethkar replied. Our stealth systems are apparently insufficient against human detection capabilities, Morden interrupted. They know we're here, sir. The main viewer activated without any input from the crew, displaying the bridge of the human flagship. A being that roughly matched Federation databases on human physiology stood at the center of what was clearly a military command center. The human wore a uniform bearing insignia that suggested high rank, and behind them, dozens of crew members worked at stations that hummed with aggressive efficiency. Unknown vessel, the human spoke in accented but clearly understandable Federation standard. This is Admiral Sarah Chen of the United Earth Space Navy. You have been observing our operations for 5 days. Please identify yourself and state your intentions. Zethkar felt his mandibles click involuntarily. The humans not only knew they were there, but had learned Federation standard well enough for diplomatic contact. How did they? We've been monitoring your communications, Admiral Chen continued, as if reading his thoughts. Your technology is quite advanced, but you've been broadcasting on frequencies we've learned to detect. We've also taken the liberty of analyzing your vessel's design and capabilities. The implication hit the crew of the Silent Wind like a physical blow. While they had been studying the humans had been studying them, and had apparently learned enough to completely compromise their stealth systems. Commander, Talvera whispered, if they can detect us this easily, and they've learned our language this quickly. Zethkar activated the communication system with trembling hands. This is Commander Zethkar of the Galactic Federation vessel, Silent Wind. We are on a peaceful observation mission in accordance with standard first contact protocols. Admiral Chen's expression didn't change, but something in her eyes suggested she found his response interesting rather than threatening. Galactic Federation. We theorize such an organization might exist. Tell me, Commander, how many species comprise this federation? Approximately 1,200 civilized worlds, Zethkar replied automatically, then immediately regretted providing strategic information. Fascinating. And all of them developed along similar lines to your own ship's design philosophy, I assume? Exploration-focused, with minimal military capabilities? The question was asked casually, but Zethkar recognized it as intelligence gathering. The Federation believes in peaceful coexistence and mutual cooperation among species. An admirable philosophy, Admiral Chen replied. Unfortunately, not one that translates well to practical survival in a universe full of unknown variables. Commander, would you be willing to accept an invitation aboard our vessel? I believe there are matters we should discuss. Talvera's hands flew across her console in panic. Commander, no. Their ship is a weapons platform. It could be a trap. But something in the human admiral's demeanor suggested otherwise to Zethkar. There was confidence there, but not the aggressive posturing he would expect from a hostile species. This was the confidence of someone who held overwhelming force, but felt no need to use it unnecessarily. What assurances can you provide for our safety? Zethkar asked. The same assurance I would give any diplomatic vessel, Commander. You are clearly here on a peaceful mission, and Earth respects diplomatic immunity. However, I should point out that if we intended you harm, this conversation would not be taking place." The casual mention of their complete vulnerability sent chills through the bridge crew, but Admiral Chen continued before anyone could respond. "Commander, your Federation is about to encounter humanity whether this meeting takes place or not. Our exploration fleets are already preparing for deep space missions. The question is whether that first encounter happens through diplomatic channels or through other means." Zethkar understood the implication. The human fleet he had observed was preparing for expansion into the galaxy, and they would encounter Federation worlds eventually. Better to establish communication now than wait for an accidental first contact that might end in disaster. "Very well, Admiral. I will accept your invitation." 20 minutes later, Zethkar found himself in the transport bay of the human flagship, surrounded by technology that defied easy classification. The walls hummed with energy, and everywhere he looked, he saw evidence of a civilization that had turned engineering into an instrument of war. Admiral Chen met him personally, accompanied by what were clearly senior officers. Up close, the humans seemed less intimidating than their technology suggested, physically unremarkable by galactic standards, though there was something in their bearing that spoke of absolute confidence in their capabilities. "Welcome aboard the UES Indomitable, Commander," Admiral Chen said, gesturing for him to follow. "I apologize for the military nature of our vessel, but I'm afraid we haven't yet built ships designed purely for peaceful contact." They walked through corridors lined with weapon storage, tactical displays, and crew quarters designed for beings who expected to fight for their survival. But what struck Zethkar most was not the military nature of the ship, but the casual efficiency with which the humans operated it. "Admiral," he said finally, "your species has developed remarkable capabilities for one that has not yet achieved interstellar contact." "Oh, but we have achieved interstellar contact, Commander," Admiral Chen replied with a slight smile. "We've been monitoring Federation transmissions for quite some time. We know about your 1,200 worlds, your peaceful expansion policies, your diplomatic protocols. We've learned your languages, studied your technologies, and assessed your military capabilities." They entered what was clearly a strategic planning center, where holographic displays showed not just the Sol system, but star maps extending deep into Federation space. Zethkar realized with growing horror that the humans had not just been preparing for contact with unknown aliens, they had been preparing specifically for contact with the Federation. "How long have you been aware of us?" he asked. "Approximately 8 years, Admiral Chen replied. "We detected your deep space monitoring stations and began systematic observation. We've identified the locations of 17 Federation worlds within 50 light-years of Earth, cataloged your defensive capabilities, and developed response protocols for various contact scenarios." Response protocols? Plans for peaceful cooperation, limited engagement, defensive action, and if necessary, preemptive neutralization of threats to Earth's security. Admiral Chen delivered this casually, as if discussing routine administrative procedures. Zethkar finally understood the true nature of what he was dealing with. The humans hadn't just developed military technology. They had spent years preparing specifically for contact with the Federation, studying them, learning their weaknesses, and developing plans for every possible outcome. "Admiral, the Federation has no hostile intentions toward your species." "I believe that, Commander. Your own vessel's capabilities suggest a civilization focused on exploration rather than conquest. But you must understand our position. We've observed your Federation's expansion patterns, studied your history of contact with primitive species, and noted that membership in your organization typically involves significant cultural adjustments. The Federation respects the autonomy of member species. Perhaps. But Earth will not become a junior member of any galactic organization, Commander. We've spent too long fighting for our independence to surrender it to alien bureaucrats, however well-intentioned. The meeting continued for several hours, but the essential understanding was clear from the beginning. Humanity was not seeking membership in the Federation. They were announcing their arrival as an independent power that intended to claim their place in the galaxy on their own terms. As Zethkar returned to his ship, he carried with him the knowledge that everything was about to change. The Federation's peaceful expansion into the galaxy had just encountered something unprecedented, a species that was not only technologically capable of challenging galactic powers, but had spent years preparing specifically for that challenge. The humans were coming to the stars, and they were coming as equals, not as students seeking guidance. The galaxy would never be the same.